Hey ho, dear ones. Welcome to Soul Alive Radio. And today we're talking about how your spiritual gifts actually make you money. Because here's something I've really noticed many coaches and healers believe their spiritual gifts are something nice and beautiful and expansive, but somehow separate from their business. So the business side of the house is creating content, designing launch strategies, showing up on social media. And then there's the spiritual gifts that, yes, shows up in client sessions and classes and products. But I think ultimately it's something that is cultivated in private during the alone spiritual practice, um, you know, away from business life. So, yes, something that helps them connect with clients, something that deepens their sessions, but not necessarily something that drives income. And in reality, the opposite is true. Your spiritual gifts are the most valuable asset in your entire business because they shape the depth of transformation you create with your clients, and transformation is what clients actually pay for. And not only that, and this is so important, and I've been talking about this in these last few episodes about our spiritual gifts in our business. And I'm going to say it again and again because it's so important. If you want to run a successful business, yes, you need marketing and sales strategies that work for you and your energy. And your spiritual gifts are the things that are going to guide you to how to craft strategies or ways of showing up or ways to connect with your ideal audience in your business that feels most aligned, that makes you feel most alive. I think it was Bill Gates who said, I look at my agenda every morning or every week and I ask myself, am I excited about what's on it? And if I'm not excited about what's on my agenda, I change it. I change it up. And this is something that I've really taken on in my own life. I do weekly planning on every Sunday where I plan the day ahead and then I do a quick morning plan at the start of each morning. What am I being called to do this week, this day? I also do quarterly planning. I also do yearly planning because I love to plan. Also, I have a defined root center, which means I am designed to follow my natural pulses of energy. So if I have a natural pulse to say record a podcast episode today, that's when I'm most aligned. And if I don't have that natural pulse, I shouldn't force myself. Now, I have deadlines, you have deadlines, we all have deadlines. So sometimes you have to go color outside of those lines. But in general, I try to follow those natural pulses so that the work I do in my life and my business is always something I'm more or less looking forward to. And with this, I try to go for the 80% solution. I know I'm not going to look forward to 100% of things on my to do list 100% of the time. I mean, we all have to do taxes. I don't look forward to doing my taxes. I'm not really a down in the weeds kind of person. So I really don't enjoy tasks that put me down in the weeds. But sometimes you just got to get it done. So I do follow that 80% solution where about 80% of the things on my agenda in an average day, I more or less look forward to them. And it's my spiritual gifts that guide me to that. They guide me to what is on that agenda, especially for my business, which is driving what I'm doing in my marketing, which is driving what I'm doing with my sales, which is driving how I serve my clients. And the more I align to my gifts, to my intuition, my healing, my manifestation, my teaching, my leadership, the more easeful income flows into my experience. But It's also true that it also asks me to surrender all the more because what happens often is my higher self calls me to a strategy for my business. And I implement that strategy. So it's all aligned, it's all higher self led, it's all embodied using my spiritual gifts. And then the results don't come from that thing, that strategy, the way I had anticipated. Now, if I'm out of alignment and in my shadow and not utilizing my spiritual gifts, then I will allow those, what my brain will perceive as bad results, to lower my vibrational frequency, take me out of alignment, get me saying things like, I am failing, there is something wrong with me, why can't I do this? Way to go, Allison. And trust me, I've had a lot of those moments in my career, lots of them. But when I notice me dipping into shadow and I use my spiritual gifts to shift back into higher alignment, and remember, we're not meant to be high vibe all the time. So, our spiritual gifts are the things that not only enable us to reach higher and higher levels of alignment, it's our spiritual gifts that enable us to notice faster and faster and faster when we are out of alignment. And I'm using the word faster because it's really spiritual gifts is about recovery and response time. So, what that means is you put a launch out there, it's a higher self led launch, and it doesn't go as you had planned. And that throws you out of alignment. How long do you stay in shadow, out of alignment, beating yourself up because the results weren't what your brain wanted or weren't even what your higher self was nudging you towards? How long do you stay in the lack, in the fear, in the shadow? But it just didn't unfold the way I thought it should. But it's still giving me the results I want. This is so often how manifestation actually unfolds. And it's not to say you can't craft a strategy in your business, follow that strategy, and get the exact results that you wanted. That can happen, and I invite you to strive for that because it's always very satisfying when that happens, and I strive for that. But so often it doesn't unfold that way at the beginning. So if you're trying to grow in your business to something higher and you've not been at those higher levels yet, it's those initial launches, those initial tries that may have you not getting the results the way that you had planned to receive them. But if you can keep your frequency high, and it's not about forcing yourself to be high vibe all the time, it's not about that. It's about recovery. We know we're always going to get triggered. We know we're always going to dip into shadow. So it's the recovery time, the awareness, oop, I'm in shadow. And do we notice that we're in shadow after a few minutes, or do we notice after a few days or a few weeks? It's about reducing the time in shadow. We can't erase the shadow completely until we reach enlightenment in human form. But until that time, shadow is going to be part of it. We will get triggered. We will dip down into low frequencies. Catalytic events will happen in our outer reality. I just lost two dear people in my life. I lost a former mentor who passed away completely unexpectedly at 54 years old. And that's Michael Trotta, who played an enormous role in my life in my early days as a coach. He was a mentor of mine for several years and then transformed into a peer and then transformed into a friend. And very sadly, I had fallen out of touch with him in the last few years. Very sadly, I had so many times where I woke up in the morning and said, I need to reach out to Michael and see how he's doing. And then I didn't. the curse of the six line. All you six liners, we tend to be quite bad at keeping in touch. And it's not that we don't love the people, and it's not that we don't care, and it's not that we're jerks. It's that we're just not really designed to keep in touch with a lot of people. And I think especially if you have open sacral, if you're a manifester, projector, or reflector, then it's even more difficult to keep in touch with people when you move it on to a new stage of your life. And that's kind of what happened. I was moving in one direction and Michael was moving in another, and I we just fell out of touch, and I just didn't follow up. And my higher self was saying, "Allison, reach out to Michael. Just see how he's doing." My higher self was calling me to that. And I am so surrendered to the voice of my higher self. But didn't. I didn't heed the voice. And so I just want to ask why. Why didn't I? I haven't really asked that question until now. So let me just see what answer I get. Why didn't I heed the voice? Well, you probably won't be surprised to hear the response I just got, which was because I needed to learn the lesson. And I tell you what, this lesson hurts a little bit. And I'm getting a double whammy of the lesson. Ugh, thanks. Um, the other person who passed away was like a second father to me. And it was my best friend's father. I grew up with this guy. I've known my best friends since we were 4 years old in ballet together. And I knew he was sick. I knew he had cancer. And I knew my best friend, who's a registered nurse, had become his like primary caretaker, but I didn't call her and check in to see how she was doing. I didn't call her because her father had cancer, but they were treating it. But what I didn't know is that he was actually in quite a lot of pain and discomfort. And my best friend was the one caring for him. And nobody can care for a sick person better than my friend. But then I found out that he was actually quite sick and he didn't have many days left. And so I immediately called my friend then. And shared with me how it's been going. And I realized I should have called the whole hell of a lot sooner. The bloody shadow of the six line. I should have checked in sooner with her because she needed a friend. She needed someone just checking in on her. Guess what? This is what really hurts. If it would have been me, she would have called. I can promise you that. She would have called me. She always has when my life gets tough. So, yeah, sometimes the shadow lessons can be really tough. I might have to change the title of this episode because I didn't really mean to go here. But I can use my spiritual gifts right now in this moment to shift back in because I got the lesson. I got the lesson. Some people, I can't keep in touch with everybody. I know too many people. I've lived in 10 countries on 4 continents. I've had a lot of different jobs and permutations, and I've met a lot of people. I'm blessed with this really expansive, extraordinary network. I can't keep in touch with everybody on the day to day. Of course, if someone's coming through town and visiting, then yes, please reach out to me and let me know. Like, yes, but like, I can't keep in touch with my whole network on the daily, on the weekly, on the monthly. But my higher self will always guide me, always to when it's time to reach out to someone. And I have learned the lesson in a kind of painful way, but those are the lessons that we tend to learn, right? That if my higher self is saying it's time to reach out to someone, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prioritize it in my schedule. I'm not going to put it off till tomorrow. I'm just going to reach out. A call, a text message, and say, "Hey, how you doing? I've been thinking about you." Where did we start this episode? How to make money. How to make money in your spiritual gifts. It's so much more than making money. And they will help you make money. In fact, we've been using our spiritual gifts our whole lives to make money without realizing it. But ultimately, we are here to be supported on our path to fulfilling our big soul mission. We're here to have resources, support, a nice environment to live in, travel opportunities. All of this is what we're meant to experience. And the tools that will help us call in all that support and abundance is our spiritual gifts. And our job is to notice when there's a lesson present that I just learned, and when there's a block that needs to be released. And the block that I just released was one that was very just self-critical of myself. I messed up. I should have reached out. And that is indeed a block. It's a wound. It's actually not true because these individuals could have also reached out to me. My best friend could have called me and said, "Hey, Allison, I need you." Michael could have reached out to me and said, "Hey, Allison, how are you?" Right? And it's totally fine that he didn't. I'm just saying, like, my blocks aren't telling the true story. Neither do yours. And now that I've had a little bit of a cry, thank you for holding the space. I'm releasing it. It's transmuting, it's processing. And now I'm going into something higher, connecting back to higher self. I've retrieved the lesson. Higher self, how can we bring this home for the listeners to really help them shift into their abundance? Because that is ultimately what this episode was about, using their spiritual gifts. My higher self's invitation for you this week is to notice what you might be holding on to with regards to money. So I was just holding on to the thought of I should have reached out to them. And that was actually putting me into low vibrational frequencies. It was taking me out of alignment. So, what story are you telling yourself that's taking you out of alignment to receiving money, generating wealth, allowing it into your experience? What is a story? A story you tell yourself that at least part of the time feels true. Can you notice what emotions are triggered when the thought feels true? Feel the feels, breathe, and release. And if you're feeling the pull to activate your spiritual gifts more fully in the way you serve clients and grow your business, I invite you to explore Soul Blueprint. Inside Soul Blueprint, we activate your 5 spiritual gifts so they become something you can consistently access and apply in your work and leadership. And the best way to explore whether it's the right next step for you is through a Soul Blueprint connection call. On the call, we'll look at your spiritual gifts, the way you're currently serving clients, and whether activating those gifts through Soul Blueprint would support the next level of your work and your business. You can book your call through a link in the show notes, or don't be afraid to DM me or send me a message at allison@allisonscampbell.com, and I will send you the link. That's a wrap for this week. Thank you for holding the space, And as always, until next time, may you be soul alive.